Wubba-lubba-dub-dub. Welcome to Module 3. So in this module, we're going to get into SQL, our structured query language. And so we're going to get into what it looks like, how to write it, all the components of it, and everything like that. So our learning objectives for the entire module, again, it's all dealing with the SQL language. So we're going to learn how to do all of these different things with SQL. Yep, more, again, everything using SQL. All right, so this first segment, we're going to get started with SQL, look at the very basics and get it set up and get ready to start writing our SQL statements. So to get started with SQL, we're still going to be using Access, but now we're going to be using the SQL view. And so when we're using this view, by default, the font is a little different. So by default, it's a size 8-point font, and it also has what we refer to as a proportional font, meaning that it's only given enough space as needed for each character. Unlike a typical monospaced font where you're given a fixed amount of width for each character. So, for instance, if you're looking at like an uppercase L and the number 1, right, the width of those are completely different. So with monospaced, you're given a fixed length of width for each character, so everything is nice and evenly spaced. But with the SQL view and Access, it uses proportional font, so things might look kind of squished together or look a little different. Again, it also, by default, has an 8-point font. So some recommended changes, and you don't have to do this, but I do encourage you and recommend you to do this, is to kind of change the font. So to do that, we're going to come up to File, and then we're going to come all the way down here to Options. And then once the Access Options dialog box opens up, we're going to come here to Object Designers. And then underneath our Object Designers, we have our query design. And so we can see, again, there's that 8-point default font with this font that it's using currently by default. So I'm going to change this to Courier New. There it is. That was a hassle. 12-point font. And so again, you don't have to make these changes, but if you do, when you go through these exercises, it will look very similar to how it looks inside of your text and inside of MindTap and things like that. It'll look much more similar because that's what they use. So yeah, there's changing those fonts. So setting up a query with SQL, I already have one open. Let me close that. It's exactly identical to the way that we created queries before. We come to Create, Query Design, but then we can just close our table box that pops open, and then up under View, we're just going to select SQL. And so here is our SQL language, our structured query language, and here's where we can manually put in some SQL statements. So up until this point, we've been using the GUI, the graphical user interface. In order to do that, by using the design view and dragging tables and dragging the fields down here and things like that. So now we're going to get into really kind of the meat of things, which is the SQL language and writing SQL statements. And so this is kind of the platform that we're going to start off doing that with. So our SQL statement, when we're in this view here, when we're writing our query in SQL, it's essentially just like a text document. We can use the arrows to navigate. We can go back, delete characters, things like that. So you can just treat it kind of essentially like any other text document that you would. And then when we run it, we're just going to run the run button, right? So for a very quick, brief demonstration, I'll say from client. So I'm going to say select. This asterisk is kind of a wild card. It means like match anything. So when you use it like this, essentially it's going to return everything. So I'm saying select all the fields from the table of clients. So I run this, and then it just gives me everything because that's what I selected. I selected, the wild card. I selected everything. So there's that very basic SQL statement. I didn't obviously put in any conditions or anything like that, or use the where clause. But we'll get into all of that good stuff later on. All right, so that very quick segment wraps up the first of Module 3, kind of getting our SQL interface set up and ready to go and understanding how it works. So we'll see you in the next segment.